A movie based on a theme park ride is guaranteed success, right? Apparently not. So, Haunted Mansion released back in July. I know I'm late on this movie, but I don't really care. So, there was, of course, a 1993 version of this movie titled The Haunted Mansion, starring Eddie Murphy, and I haven't seen it in years. I remember it being pretty bad, but I don't remember anything about it. But judging from the reviews for that movie, it seems like my assessment is probably pretty accurate. And the trailers for this movie looked pretty bad. This looked like it was just going to be an insufferably bad comedy. And I know it's a Disney movie, so you're all waiting for me to tear it a new asshole like I've done with every other film the studio's put out in the last 3 years. But truth be told, this wasn't that bad. It wasn't great, but I didn't hate it. There are plenty of things to make fun of in this movie, but there are also some things to praise, which is more than I can say for some movies that Disney came out with this year. Little Mermaid. So, why don't I start with the positives first? First off, most of the acting is pretty good. I like the main guy who plays Ben. I don't know who he is, but he does a pretty good job with this role. Owen Wilson is solid as the priest. Rosario Dawson's acting is decent. And surprisingly enough, the kid, Rosario Dawson's son in this movie, I don't remember anybody's name, I'll just put that out, except for Ben. That's the only one I remember. His acting was actually pretty decent. Normally, kids or child actors are the detriment to movies like these, because their acting is usually really over the top and hokey and really obnoxious. But the kid is actually a pretty decent actor. Speaking of annoying, though, Tiffany Haddish's character is goddamn obnoxious. She's supposed to be a psychic or a medium, as she says it. But, again, psychics in real life are just people who look into glass balls and smoke pot. That's essentially what they are in real life. And she's really obnoxious, and I will say that when the scary scenes show up, I put that in quotes for a reason you'll understand in a little bit, the acting does get a little over the top of people running around, screaming, making big faces, flailing their arms around. This movie kind of feels like a Disney Channel movie at times, and again, I'll expand upon that in a little bit. Danny DeVito is fine, but again, he's a little over the top, and it's a little irritating. Surprisingly, though, probably my favorite performance in this movie was Jared Leto. I think he's like the hat box ghost or something. I don't remember what he's called. He's the villain of the movie. He's what I use for my thumbnail. And he's actually pretty cool. He's relatively intimidating. His voice is the voice he uses for it is actually pretty cool. And there was none of this notice me acting that he's been doing pretty much his entire career outside of Morbius. Did he do method acting on set? Probably, but it didn't show in the movie for once, so I was definitely glad about that. The special effects are pretty good, actually. The designs, unfortunately, are really lame. Like, all of the ghosts are just people with that blue tint over them that's been being used for the past century of movies to convey that it's a ghost. It's just some blue tint around it. Even the Muppets did this one, and honestly, I think the Muppets did it better. So, yeah, it's pretty lame, but I do think the effects themselves, for the most part, look pretty good. Every once in a while, they don't look good. Like, there's a scene where Ben and the kid are being chased up a wall by alligators, and he kicks one off, and as the alligator's falling, the effect kind of goes to shit, but other than just a few moments like that, the special effects did seem pretty good, which is good considering Disney has not exactly been known for good CGI the last few years. And there are some clever bits of editing throughout this movie, like when the camera will like spin when the walls like change or something, or someone will go through something, and the way the angle is done, it's got some clever moments to it in the editing department. But the biggest problem with this movie, surprise, surprise, is the script. Because it's not funny or scary. And, side note, this movie is PG-13. And you want to know why it's PG-13? Well, I do too. I have no idea why this movie is PG-13. This movie could play on the Disney Channel, and I don't think anybody would have batted an eye. No one swears, at least I don't think so. There's nothing violent about this movie at all, so there's no reason for this to be a PG-13. And again, there's nothing much that's actually scary in this movie. Honestly, and like I said earlier, I said I'd expand upon this a little, it feels like a Disney Channel movie. It feels like an Disney Channel movie that roped A-list actors into starring in it. Because I remember the Disney Channel's made a few Halloween movies. None of them are particularly scary, like ones like Halloween Town or the Under Wraps movies. And they all feel very similar to this. I feel like this movie is like... this movie feels like a $140 million Disney Channel movie. But, again, the script is the biggest problem because not much makes sense. The characters are fine, but they're all just kind of bland. Most of them are likable, at least, except for Haddish's character. She's annoying as hell. To a point where... And also there's Jamie Lee Curtis, who's human trash. To the point where when she showed up to fight Leto's character, I was rooting for Leto. I was legitimately rooting for the villain to kill her because Lee Curtis is absolute garbage. So, yeah, that just occurred to me. But again, it's just nothing's funny about this movie. The comedy this is supposed to be like a comedic family horror movie, but it doesn't do well with the comedy or the horror. It's like the most basic jump scares. And also, I got really sick of the dream sequence fake outs. The same thing I had with Shut In, that movie from 2016, not the one that came out last year, but the one that came out in 2016. There were so many dream sequence fake outs that it was annoying. And you know what I mean. Or it's like one of those jump scares where someone's like looking around for goddamn ever just for something to jump out. It's not scary because I know what's going to happen. Something's going to jump out, the person's gonna scream, and they're gonna run for the fucking hills. It's not scary if you know what's coming. And again, there's nothing really new about this movie. Nothing's very unique. Some of the visuals are okay. A lot of them are references to the original Haunted Mansion tourist attraction, which are pretty cool. Those are some pretty fun moments. I like the vertical ceiling where the ceiling or the wall stretches up and they're climbing up and being chased by alligators. And during the climax where the hallways are kind of spinning, and it's people will be in the same hallway, then it splits in half and one side will spin, and when it comes back up, the other person's no longer there because they're on the other side, I guess. It's some pretty fun editing, but... And speaking of the climax, I'll get to that in a second, but that's really all the movie has in terms of that. And the climax itself is not very enticing. The villain needs someone to willingly give their soul for his 100th soul. The villain's plan was kind of hard to follow, but it wasn't bad, I guess. And the chase with Ben and Dawson's character, when they're being chased and everything, and the walls and everything are spinning or stretching and everything... those moments are pretty cool. But then there's Owen Wilson's character, who again is a priest, and he was supposed to perform an exorcism here, but I guess it didn't work. And he convinces the other ghosts to fight back against Leto. And if it was written a bit better, I think that could have been pretty funny. But it was just kind of the same generic dialogue you get anytime someone convinces anybody to not be evil. It wasn't bad, but I feel like there was a little bit more room for creativity. And again, the final fight was just odd. Again, the visuals looked okay, but again, I just don't have any connection to most of these characters. The only one I really cared that much about was Ben, because he was one of the only relatable characters in this movie. Dawson's character was fine, but again, just wasn't much relatability. The kid was fine. Wilson, again, it almost kind of felt almost like a parody of a priest, because they kind of treat him like an idiot who doesn't really know what's going on or what he's supposed to be doing. And again, DeVito was a bit over the top, and once DeVito and Haddish showed up, I feel like that was the point, and that was 30 minutes in. The first 20-30 minutes of this movie were fucking boring as hell. And once Haddish and DeVito showed up, it felt like there were too many characters in this movie. I would have cut them and just made it focused on Ben, Dawson, Wilson, and the kid. That's what I would have done. I would have just focused on these 4 characters instead of shoving 2 more in where they didn't belong. I mean, they kind of used DeVito for exposition, but he only needed to be in that one scene. He didn't need to be in the rest of the movie, but they had him in the rest of the movie because they got Danny DeVito to say yes. So that's what I'm thinking. The music is pretty decent. It's not great. Like, it kind of just gets drowned out in the background most of the time. But I do think the score was decent. It was serviceable enough for the film. So, I didn't hate this movie. I really thought I was going to hate this movie, but I didn't. It was a perfectly serviceable family horror movie. It wasn't scary or funny in the slightest, but it was a perfectly fine movie. It's not going to enrage anybody like Little Mermaid or Peter Pan and Wendy did. But I don't think you're gonna walk out of the theater saying, you know what, that was definitely worth 2 hours of my time. If you want to watch it, wait for a rental around Halloween. That's the best recommendation I can give it. I'm gonna give Haunted Mansion a C. So thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.